Compassion isn't a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals, and to truly practice compassion, we have to first be willing to sit with our own pain. We often think of compassion as something we give to others, like a blanket we wrap around someone who is hurting, but the truth is, we can't give what we don't have. If we haven't learned how to hold space for our own shame, our own grief, our own fear, then the compassion we try to offer others is going to come with judgment, with urgency, with a need to fix, to control, to make it better just so we can feel more comfortable. That's not compassion. That's discomfort in disguise. Real compassion is born out of vulnerability. It's the result of walking into the fire of your own struggle and not running from it. When we learn to treat ourselves with kindness, not after we've done something amazing, not when we're proud of ourselves, but in those messy, uncertain moments where we feel the most unworthy, that's when compassion takes root. Because if you can't look at yourself in the mirror in the middle of your mistakes and say you're still worthy of love, then every time you look at someone else who is suffering, some part of you will believe they have to earn your kindness too. The secret to compassion isn't a technique. It's not something you master by reading books or going to retreats. The secret is courage. The courage to be imperfect. The courage to set boundaries even when it disappoints people. The courage to say, this hurts and I'm not okay, instead of pretending to be strong all the time. That kind of courage is what compassion grows from. It doesn't grow from superiority or martyrdom. It grows from shared humanity. From the realization that all of us are just trying to make it through this life, carrying stories we're scared to speak out loud, fears we try to bury beneath perfectionism, and wounds we hope no one sees. Compassion starts when we stop numbing, when we stop trying to outrun our discomfort with busyness or blame. It starts when we're willing to be still and listen to ourselves and to others. Not to fix, not to advise, but to understand. Listening is a radical act of compassion because it tells someone, I see you, I hear you, and I'm not leaving, even though I don't have the answers. That is where healing happens. Not in the advice, not in the solutions, but in the presence. And presence, real presence, is only possible when we're grounded in our own worthiness. Because otherwise, compassion becomes a performance. It becomes a role we play. But true compassion doesn't need an audience. It's quiet. It's messy. It doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it means crying with someone and not having the right words. Sometimes it means holding space for grief without rushing to make it better. Sometimes it means stepping away, taking care of yourself first, because that's the most loving thing you can do for someone else. We get taught that compassion means giving everything away, that it means sacrificing ourselves to care for others. But that's not sustainable. That's not love. That's self-abandonment dressed up as virtue. And eventually, it leads to resentment. Real compassion includes you. It honors your limits. It allows you to say no, because when you give from a place of depletion, you're not really giving. You're leaking. But when you give from a place of wholeness, that's when compassion becomes transformative. That's when it becomes the bridge that connects pain to healing, shame to empathy, isolation to belonging. So if you're looking for the secret to compassion, start by being honest with yourself. What are the stories you tell yourself when you fall short? What are the things you believe about your own worth? Because those are the beliefs that will shape how you treat other people. If you think you have to earn love by being perfect, you will expect the same from everyone else. If you believe your flaws make you unworthy, you will struggle to offer grace to others in their moments of failure. But if you can sit with your imperfection, if you can meet yourself with kindness when it's the hardest, then you will discover the well of compassion inside you is deeper than you ever imagined. You will stop seeing other people as problems to fix and start seeing them as people to love, even in their brokenness, especially in their brokenness. Because that's when love is real. That's when compassion becomes powerful. Not when it's easy, not when it's polished, but when it's raw and honest and brave. That's the secret. Not looking away, not turning people into projects, but choosing to stay, choosing to feel, choosing to love, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. You cannot offer true compassion to others without first practicing it with yourself. This truth is uncomfortable for many of us because we were raised to believe that compassion is something you do for other people. We were taught to put others first, to care, to be kind, to serve, but rarely were we told that those same qualities had to begin with how we treat ourselves. In fact, for a lot of people, the idea of self-compassion sounds selfish or weak. There's a voice in our head, shaped by years of conditioning, that whispers, "Who do you think you are to be kind to yourself? You haven't earned that yet." But compassion is not a reward for performance. It's not something you get after proving your worth. It's a practice, and it begins with the way you talk to yourself when no one is watching. Imagine a moment when you've made a mistake. Not a small one, but one that really hurts, something that triggers shame or regret. In that moment, what's your first instinct? Most of us go straight into self-criticism. We rehearse every failure. We tell ourselves things we would never say to another human being. We confuse accountability with punishment. And the belief is often this: if I beat myself up enough, I won't make the same mistake again. But shame doesn't create growth. It creates paralysis. It disconnects us from others, and more dangerously from ourselves. Compassion, on the other hand, invites accountability with gentleness. It says, yes, this was hard. Yes, this was painful. And you are still worthy of love and respect. Self-compassion isn't about avoiding responsibility or letting yourself off the hook. It's about holding yourself with honesty and care at the same time. It's the decision to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love. And here's the paradox. When we learn to treat ourselves that way, we actually become more capable of offering true compassion to others. Not performative kindness, not obligatory empathy, but real, grounded compassion, the kind that stays present with someone's pain without trying to fix it, rush it, or avoid it. When we lack self-compassion, our attempts to help others often come with invisible strings. Maybe we offer support because we want to feel needed, or because we're uncomfortable with someone else's vulnerability. Maybe we give advice not out of wisdom but out of our own need to be in control. Without self-compassion, our actions, even when well-intentioned, are shaped by our own unhealed parts. But when we've done the work of sitting with our own suffering, when we've learned how to show up for ourselves in the darkest moments, something shifts. We stop needing people to feel better so we can feel better. We stop using compassion as a way to manage our own discomfort. We start to show up differently, with more humility, more patience, more presence. There's a kind of clarity that comes from self-compassion, a kind of inner stillness that allows us to be with people exactly where they are, without needing them to change. We no longer approach their pain from a place of pity or superiority, but from a place of solidarity. We begin to understand that we're not so different after all, that their fear, their grief, their shame, they're not alien, they're familiar. We've met them before in our own lives. And because we've met them with kindness, we can now extend that same kindness outward. Practicing self-compassion also allows us to set healthy boundaries, which are a crucial part of real compassion. Without it, we burn out. We give more than we can afford to give. We say yes when we mean no. We resent the people we're trying to care for. But when we're compassionate with ourselves, we can acknowledge our own limits without shame. We can say, I care about you deeply, and I also need rest. That kind of honesty creates trust. It invites authenticity into our relationships. It models what it looks like to live with integrity and self-respect. It's easy to look at compassion as something external, something that lives in how we treat others. But the root of it is internal. It begins with our relationship to ourselves. And the way we treat ourselves becomes the blueprint for how we engage with the world. If we meet our own fear with judgment, we will meet others' fear with judgment too. If we silence our own grief, we will rush other people through theirs. But if we can learn to sit with ourselves, with all the mess, all the flaws, all the pain, and respond with gentleness, then we begin to develop the kind of compassion that doesn't need to prove itself. The kind that heals not by solving, but by witnessing. The kind that holds space, quietly and bravely, without needing to escape. Compassion for others starts with the radical, often uncomfortable choice to turn that same love inward, not once, not occasionally, but as a daily practice, a commitment, a way of being in the world that begins not with what we do, but with how we see ourselves in the mirror. Compassion grows from vulnerability, not perfection. This truth challenges the way many of us were raised to understand kindness and connection. We were taught that to be compassionate, we need to have it all together, to be strong, to be unshaken. We've come to associate compassion with someone who is always calm, composed, and in control. But real compassion doesn't come from having the right words, or from never making mistakes. It comes from the ability to relate to pain, to uncertainty, to fear, not from a distance, but from our own lived experience of it. It is vulnerability, not flawless strength, that allows us to connect with others on a meaningful level. When we try to love from a place of perfection, we offer people our mask, not our heart. Vulnerability strips away the performance and brings in the authenticity that compassion needs in order to grow. The world often tells us that vulnerability is weakness, something to be hidden, something to be ashamed of. But vulnerability is the most accurate measure of courage we have. It's the willingness to show up when you can't control the outcome. It's the courage to say, I'm struggling, or I don't know, or this hurts, without knowing how it will be received. And when we allow ourselves to be that open, that real, we create space for others to do the same. That space is where compassion lives, not in the illusion of perfection, but in the shared truth of our imperfections. The people who offer the deepest compassion are almost always the ones who have had to navigate their own hard truths. They don't pity, they understand. They don't try to fix you to feel better about themselves. They stay present because they know how much it matters. When we lead with perfection, we unintentionally create distance. People don't connect with our achievements or our polished exteriors. They connect with our stories, our cracks, our humanity. Vulnerability bridges the gap between us and others. It says, I've been there too, even if the details are different. It dismantles the toxic myths of comparison and competition, reminding us that pain is not a contest and healing is not a performance. Compassion rooted in vulnerability doesn't look like grand gestures. It looks like listening without judgment. It looks like sitting with someone in their silence. It looks like holding a hand during uncertainty, not because you have the answers, but because you're willing to stay through the unknown. In contrast, when we lead with the need to appear perfect, our compassion becomes conditional. We start to evaluate people's pain through the lens of what we think is acceptable, respectable, or earned. We offer kindness to those who seem to have suffered in a way that fits our narrative, but we judge or dismiss those whose struggle makes us uncomfortable. Perfection tells us there's a right way to be in pain. Vulnerability tells us there is only your way, and it's worthy of compassion, no matter how messy, raw, or unfamiliar it looks. Vulnerability opens the door to empathy, because it takes away the need to be right or safe or in control. It allows us to be present with another person's experience, without having to defend ourselves against our own discomfort. The hardest part about leading with vulnerability is that it's unpredictable. It's not safe or sanitized. It asks us to risk being misunderstood, being rejected, or even being hurt. But those risks are also what make vulnerability so powerful. You cannot have compassion without risk, because true compassion requires you to step into the emotional world of someone else. And if you haven't learned how to be present with your own emotional world, you'll struggle to hold space for someone else's. That's why vulnerability has to come first. It's not the end of the journey. It's the foundation. It's what allows you to say, me too, instead of you should. It's what allows you to ask, what do you need, instead of saying, here's what I would do. That shift from advising to accompanying is the essence of compassionate presence. We often think the more we heal, the less we'll need to be vulnerable. But the opposite is true. Healing doesn't take away vulnerability. It deepens our relationship with it. As we become more grounded in who we are, we stop seeing vulnerability as a threat and start recognizing it as a strength. It doesn't mean we'll never be scared, but it means we won't let that fear run the show. We learn to stay open, even when it's hard. We learn to let people see us, not the curated version, but the real breathing, feeling version. And the more we do that, the more naturally compassion flows from us. Not because we've mastered it, but because we're living it. We're showing up honestly, and in that honesty we make it safe for others to do the same. Compassion born from vulnerability has a different texture. It's softer, slower, more patient. It doesn't rush the process or demand results. It doesn't turn suffering into a lesson before the person is ready. It doesn't try to outshine pain with positivity. Instead, it honors the space between hurting and healing. It recognizes that what most people need is not advice or rescue, but presence and respect. Vulnerability teaches us how to be that kind of presence, how to meet people where they are, not where we wish they were. It teaches us to stop trying to rescue and start trying to relate. And that's when compassion stops being something we do and becomes something we are. It becomes part of how we move through the world, not perfectly, but fully, bravely, and with our hearts wide open. Judgment-free presence is the foundation of real compassion. It's one thing to care for someone when their emotions are easy to understand, when their pain makes sense to us, or fits neatly into the categories we recognize. But the true test of compassion is whether we can stay with someone even when their experience makes us uncomfortable, when we don't have the answers, when their truth challenges our assumptions, or pushes on our edges. Presence without judgment is not passive. It's a deeply active practice. It requires awareness, restraint, and a level of emotional maturity that doesn't rush in to fix or control. It means being fully with someone, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, without turning their pain into a project, or their struggle into something that needs to be resolved, in order for us to feel okay. We're conditioned to believe that to be helpful, we must be useful in a very particular way. We must offer a solution. We must say something insightful. We must take the pain away. But judgment-free presence says, I'm here, not to change your experience, but to honor it. It's an act of humility, to stand beside someone in their pain, without offering advice, without moralizing, without comparing it to something we've been through. So often when someone shares something vulnerable, we unintentionally diminish their experience by trying to relate too quickly, by rushing to find a silver lining, or by trying to cheer them up before they've even finished telling their story. That instinct comes from our own discomfort with pain, not from compassion. Being present in a judgment-free way requires us to become aware of our own internal narratives, the ones that want to label things as right or wrong, strong or weak, justified or overreacting. It means noticing the urge to interrupt someone's vulnerability with our own version of what we think they should feel. Judgment sneaks in subtly. It can show up as body language, as impatience, as well-meaning phrases like "at least," or "you should be grateful," or "that's nothing compared to what I went through." These moments, though often unintentional, create disconnection. They tell someone that their experience is too much, too dramatic, or too inconvenient. Compassion cannot thrive in a space where someone feels they need to shrink their truth in order to be accepted. To offer someone judgment-free presence, we have to do the work of making peace with our own pain first. Because the degree to which we've rejected parts of ourselves is the same degree to which we will unconsciously reject others when they express those same parts. If we were taught that crying is weakness, we'll struggle to stay present with someone who is grieving. If we believe that anger is dangerous, we'll flinch or withdraw when someone expresses frustration. If we haven't made room for our own fear, shame, or sadness, we will instinctively shut others down when those emotions surface. The more acceptance we cultivate internally, the more space we can offer externally. This is the real work of compassion, not just learning to be kind to others, but learning to be kind to ourselves in ways that create capacity. There is something powerful about being seen exactly as you are, and still being met with gentleness. No expectations, no evaluation. Just someone saying with their presence, "You don't have to be anything else for me to stay here with you." That kind of presence doesn't require perfection or preparation. It requires willingness. willingness to stay in the room with discomfort, willingness to not have the right words, willingness to bear witness without needing to edit the moment. Compassion doesn't need to be eloquent. It just needs to be real. And that realness often comes in silence, in eye contact, in stillness, in a simple nod that says, "I'm with you." These quiet acts, though small on the surface, carry immense weight because they offer something so rare in our world, a space where someone's humanity is allowed to exist without being judged, corrected, or minimized. In a culture that constantly tells us to improve, to fix, to optimize, judgment-free presence feels countercultural. It asks us to slow down, to stop looking for quick takeaways, to stop treating emotional moments as problems that need solving. It asks us to stop multitasking our way through someone's vulnerability. This kind of presence isn't efficient. It takes time. It asks for attention. It requires us to set aside our own discomfort long enough to simply be with someone. And that kind of being is more healing than we often realize. Because what people usually remember is not what you said or what you did, but how you made them feel. Did you make space for them? Did you listen without an agenda? Did you sit with them even when you didn't understand? To cultivate judgment-free presence, we have to practice. We have to notice when we're tempted to rescue or fix. We have to pause before we speak and ask ourselves, am I saying this to truly support or to make myself feel more comfortable? We have to listen more than we speak. We have to trust that being fully present is enough. Because it is. That kind of presence tells people, you matter. Your story matters. Your pain matters. And when someone feels that level of respect and validation, healing begins, not because you solved their problem, but because you helped carry the weight of it, if only for a little while. And sometimes that's all someone needs, in order to keep going. Listening to understand, not to fix, is a radical act of compassion. It may sound simple, but it goes against many of the habits we've picked up over the years. Most of us were never taught how to listen without an agenda. We listen to respond. We listen to advise. We listen with a quiet, internal urgency that says, let me make this better. But true compassion doesn't live in advice or in problem solving. It lives in presence. And presence means holding space for someone's story without trying to edit it or rewrite it. It means resisting the urge to jump in and steer their experience toward a neater, more comfortable version. When we listen to understand, we are not trying to be right. We're not even trying to be helpful in the traditional sense. We are simply saying, I'm here. I hear you, keep going. There is a deep difference between hearing someone and truly understanding them. Hearing is passive. It's what happens when we wait for our turn to speak. When we nod politely but stay in our own thoughts. Understanding requires something else. It demands that we step out of our own worldview and into someone else's, even if just for a moment. It's empathy in action. It's choosing to be more interested in their experience than in our own interpretation of it. This kind of listening doesn't come naturally to most of us. We've been taught to value being right, to offer insight, to be productive in every conversation. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Just being fully present, with no agenda, no fix-it plan, no need to correct or improve the story, is one of the most generous things you can offer another human being. When we rush to fix, we subtly communicate that someone's pain is a problem that needs solving, that it's inconvenient, or that it makes us uncomfortable. Even if we mean well, that instinct can feel dismissive. It shifts the attention away from the person and toward our own discomfort. It can send the message that we are more focused on making the pain go away than understanding why it's there in the first place. Real listening is about slowing down long enough to be curious. Not curious so you can analyze or judge, but curious because you care, because you want to understand what it feels like to live in their skin, to carry their story, to sit in their emotion without trying to edit it into something more manageable. Compassionate listening requires emotional courage. It means being willing to sit with things that don't have easy answers. It means being okay with discomfort, with awkward silences, with uncertainty. It means choosing presence over performance. Sometimes the person speaking doesn't need a solution. They need solidarity. They need someone to look them in the eye and say, "That sounds really hard," and mean it, not because they're trying to make it go away, but because they're acknowledging its weight. There is something deeply validating about being heard like that. It tells someone that their experience is real, that it matters, that they don't have to convince you or prove their pain to you. They can just speak. And that's enough. We often underestimate how much people are holding in. Behind every story shared is usually 100 others that weren't. Behind every sentence is a layer of fear, of shame, of hope. When someone finally finds the courage to speak, they're not just offering words. They're offering trust. They're risking vulnerability. And how we respond in that moment has the power to either reinforce their dignity or diminish it. Listening to understand honors that risk. It says, "You don't have to shrink here. You don't have to polish your pain. I can handle the truth of your experience." That kind of safety is rare. And when people find it, they begin to heal. Not because you fixed anything, but because they didn't have to hide. Listening is often thought of as passive, but it's anything but. It's an active decision to make space for someone else's truth. It requires discipline to stay curious instead of reactive. It requires intention to stay silent when the ego wants to speak. It requires humility to admit that we don't know what someone else needs better than they do. And it requires trust. Trust that the person knows what they're feeling, that their story is valid, even if it's messy, even if it's complicated, even if it doesn't match our expectations or beliefs. Compassionate listening is about letting go of the need to be the hero in someone else's story. It's about being willing to be the witness instead, to hold space for their process, their pace, their pain. When we shift from listening to fix to listening, to understand, we change the energy in the room. We create space for people to unfold instead of contract. We give them room to process, to grieve, to make sense of things out loud, without fearing judgment or interruption. And most importantly, we let them stay the author of their own story. So often people don't need us to rewrite their story. They just need us to sit with them while they tell it. They need to know that someone cares enough to listen without needing to change the ending. Compassion begins when we are willing to hold that space. Not with answers, not with strategies, but with open hearts and the courage to let things be as they are, while someone finds their way through.